friend.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso. And previously on the channel, I've talked about Tim Burton's Batman, and its many spiritual or even direct sequels. Well, it seems like The Dark Knight is in good company, because much like Tim Burton's Batman, Richard Donner's Superman movies starring Christopher Reeve have quite an interesting history with sequels as well. And now that there's a brand new ongoing comic book series depicting the events of Christopher Reeve Superman following the events of Superman 2, I think now is about as good of a time as any to talk about the many sequels of Superman. Things start off strange pretty early on, where after the undeniable success of the first Superman film, the entire cast, director Richard Donner included, returned for the sequel. But unfortunately, more than halfway through with the film, those in charge felt that he was going a little bit too over budget, and Donner himself felt that the studio was sabotaging the movie by trying to make it too campy. Ultimately, the two parties were unable to get on the same page, as they were apparently living on two different planets. So the studio got rid of Donner, who made the first movie the success that it was, and replaced him with director Richard Lester, ordering him to reshoot a major portion of what Donner had already filmed. Ultimately, a mere 30% of Donner's original vision made it to the final cut, some of which consisted of the same exact scenes, just now shot a few years later. But others were large changes to the continuity. Full plots and payoffs were altered or just completely scrapped. The Donner cut, while keeping in tune with the original and being lighthearted, wasn't nearly as hokey or goofy from the theatrical cut. It towed the line just the right amount. In the Donner cut, we get more of Jor-El in flashback scenes. Scenes that add both to Superman and Zod's origin stories. It really makes the whole thing feel like it's one full story. Things intertwine here much better than they do in the theatrical cut. Things intertwine here a lot better than they do in the theatrical cut. Now you feel the raised stakes, you understand these characters' motivation, and it brings the drama to a much bigger scale. We also get to see a whole lot more of Lex Luthor in the Donner cut, mainly because Gene Hackman, the actor who played Lex Luthor, refused to return to set without original director Richard Donner. The Donner cut also takes its time to explain its story to the audience. Plot details that explain characters' actions were removed along with the original director. To me, the Donner cut just feels like a more complete movie. The movie just means more. Also in the Donner cut, Clark raises Lois's suspicions pretty early on, and she spends a good chunk of screen time trying to prove that Clark is in fact Superman. Also, Superman doesn't magically date Lois Lane in the original cut. He doesn't somehow take away her memory with a kiss. There are so many different things about these movies that it's probably worth its own video. And if you're interested in that, let me know in the comment section below. But the changes going from one version of this movie to another is very much reminiscent to Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon's different cuts of Justice League. These are two completely different viewing experiences. Honestly, I enjoy both cuts of the movie, but for different reasons. It's not like either one of them are really bad per se, it's just one of them is not nearly as good as the other. Luckily, the Donner cut would be officially released back in 2006, several decades after the original release of Superman 2. And it's what many people feel to be the definitive version of events. Most people accept this movie as canon, so much so that it's the only version of the movie included in the Superman movie box set. Remember that because that's gonna come up later. Following the two cuts of Superman 2, Richard Lester would return to direct Superman 3. And if Richard Donner thought that the studio was destroying the integrity of Superman with humor, then man oh man did this next installment prove him right. The story of Superman takes a backseat to a PG Richard Pryor. So, yeah, not exactly what you'd expect in a Superman movie. This really wasn't the ideal follow-up to a movie like Superman 2. I mean, the quality drop is ridiculous. That would be like going from a movie like Spider-Man 2 straight into Spider-Man 3. Oh, I guess it's exactly like that. A big telltale in how much a superhero movie's gonna suck is when they in fact don't try to interpret any of the many existing villains in the continuity, but instead opt to make a new one, which is what this movie did. And who is the villain? Oh, an evil rich dude. Yeah, that's great. So now we're dealing with Lex Luthor Light. Speaking of which, Lex Luthor is noticeably absent from the film, which is of course brought on due to Donner's absence in the series, and because of it, the movie just doesn't feel complete. You know, you could say whatever you want for the X-Men movies, right? But they did at least continually bring Magneto back into the picture. Even when he wasn't the main villain, these movies knew how important he was to the plot, and to the brand in general. The same could be said for Lex Luthor. Also mostly missing from this movie is Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane in the last two films. I mean, she does appear in the movie, but she's no longer in a starring role. Hell, she's not even in a guest starring role. It's more like a special appearance by type of ordeal. This was apparently the company's way of punishing Margot for being vocal about her and a lot of the other cast's displeasure of losing Richard Donner. But in trying to smite the actress, they really just smited their own audience. It's weird because the goofs and gags in this movie are deemed more important than the plot or the characters. Seeing the Superman emblem and opening credits not played over a space backdrop, but instead played over something that looked straight out of the Naked Gun, I don't know, is pretty off-brand. The movie also has this weird obsession with computers, and they factor into the plot quite a lot, more than I ever want to see a computer in a Superman movie. All levels of bad. And I hate to bring this back to X-Men again, but even when the X-Men had bad movies, I could at least understand how on paper they would look like successful formulas. But when I think about Superman 3 and everything that was done in it, I'm still scratching my head at how so many people can read this off a script and be like, oh yeah, that's good. This movie's gonna do fine. Don't get me wrong, the movie isn't entirely charmless. It's just mostly charmless. From time to time, Richard Pryor can come off as endearing. Just not all the time. The movie reintroduces and reunites Superman with his high school crush Lana Lang, played to perfection by Annette O'Toole. And in a day and age when nobody was willing to accept Clark with anybody else but Lois, I think that she did a really good job of maybe changing that opinion. The returning cast are still as great as always in their roles, even if the script isn't always so great to them. There's some good things, but the bad definitely outweighs the good. It's a Superman project that nobody wanted to see. It's just a Superman project that nobody really asked for. Following the letdown that was known as Superman 3, came Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. Yeah, that's right, we got subtitles now. Deal with it. Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, this movie would actually find its peace. Its forever peace, in its eternal slumber, as this movie effectively killed the Superman franchise for a long time being. But, as anybody who's ever picked up a Superman comic could tell you, Superman never dies. But still, for a time being, he was out of commission. I mean, to be fair, it's not like the series was in its prime at this point. Old Supes was flying on his last cape, or whatever reference makes more sense here for this expression. The series was in pretty bad shape, but at least every Superman movie that came prior to this was successful enough to double its costs and the box office. And this one? Well, this one also did, but just barely. These movies were making less and less money as time went on. The movie does see the welcome return of Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, but it doesn't see the return of the goodwill the series built up and then almost immediately broke down. Replacing his dim-witted assistant Otis is his dim-witted nephew played by John Cryer. The shame that he put on the Luthor name was only undone by the faith he restored in it on the show Supergirl. The movie also sees a new threat in the form of Nuclear Man, who essentially is just a new Superman clone. But if you were gonna make a Superman clone, why not just use Bizarro, who is, notably, a Superman clone? And also, considering it's Lex Luthor that made Nuclear Man with Superman's DNA, and he also has Lex Luthor's voice, does this basically make him Superboy? I just don't understand why you'd want to go this route. I don't get it. Especially considering in the last movie you already gave audiences Superman versus Superman. Needless to say, this wasn't the Superman sequel many were hoping for. As a matter of fact, this was box office kryptonite. Richard Pryor, Richard Lester, Richard Donner? It's no wonder the series had so many problems. You had nothing but dicks working on it. And that's the original 4 Superman movies. And at least half of them sucked. Yet when you hear people talk about Christopher Reeve in the role of Superman, it's always with the highest of praise. They're always talking about how iconic and legendary his performance was. But that's because they're usually referring to just the first two Superman movies, which are undoubtedly the highlight of the franchise. And often overlooked is the goofiness of Superman 3 and 4. But what's mostly completely forgotten is the spin-off Supergirl movie. Supergirl is a spin-off movie desperately trying to make a connection to the main line of films. This is every American Pie movie you've ever seen that has a subtitle attached to it. And let me tell you, Supergirl isn't shy of telling people just who her cousin is. As a matter of fact, it's probably about 30 to 40% of the movie. My cousin is Superman. Clark Kent is my cousin. You know, some people call it a secret identity, and that's because most people try to keep it a secret. You went a different route. Yes, you're Superman's cousin. Superman. I get it. But apparently the studio didn't, as Christopher Reeve turned down making an appearance in this entry, feeling a little bit fatigued with the cape and wearing his underwear over his pants. But hey, that's alright. They have a picture of the guy. That's just as good, right? No, but to be fair, that is at least something, I guess. Nothing good, but it is, in fact, something. It's kind of strange to spin off from a franchise and not have that franchise's lead at least make a cameo of some kind. But don't worry. They may not have gotten Clark Kent, but you know who they did get? Jimmy Olsen. Of course you gotta have him in the movie. Of course you gotta have Jimmy Olsen in the movie. How else are the 6 people seeing this in a movie theater supposed to know that this is gonna take place in the same time as the other Superman movies? Boy, oh boy, I sure hope this movie's jam-packed with a bunch of unneeded references and ties into those movies. Spoiler alert, I'm in luck. When Supergirl goes off to college using her new secret identity, a little asterisk on the word secret there, she becomes the dorm mate of Lucy Lane. Lucy Lane, who is in fact Lois's sister. Of course she is! Because if you can't get the original actor or actress, you know, just have a new one come in as their next of kin. Hey, if it worked for Grown-Ups too. Wait, no, never mind, it didn't. What's really interesting about this is that the studio decided to do a spin-off to a beloved franchise with a character who's never been introduced in that franchise. I guess they just thought that the Superman emblem alone was enough to sell people on the movie. Well, it wasn't, and they weren't. Interestingly enough, the movies did intend on introducing Supergirl back in the third Superman movie. But she was cut out of the script at last minute, either due to budget cuts or a bloated script. This movie does feel like it's tied into the later movies in the series. It definitely keeps that same goofy energy of the last couple films, but it tries to present it in a much more feminine kind of format, if that makes any sense. The movie is laughably goofy for the most part. And when it's not, it takes a turn into the unfortunately hard to view. While being confused about its own identity, the movie is very well aware of its lineage and legacy, and does whatever it can to remind you of it throughout its runtime. The last 2 Superman movies and its spin-off were entirely retconned during the making of the 2006 sequel/reboot, Superman Returns. A movie which hoped to see the return of Superman's box office success. And depending on who you ask and when you ask them, it did. It's been said plenty of times before, but it's been said so often only because of how true and blatant it is. But I'll just go off repeating it. This movie is a complete love letter to the Richard Donner movies. So much so that it was explicitly stated that this movie is in fact a sequel to the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, and not the Richard Lester one. Like, it went out of its way to address that. As great as those Superman films were, I think maybe the fact that it was trying to be seen as a legitimate sequel to movies several decades old at this point, with none of the original actors returning, might have been part of its problem. It does come off as a little bit unnecessary and maybe a little bit unwarranted. Those movies were fantastic, but I think it was time to move on. They casted a young, inexperienced Brandon Routh to try to step into Christopher Reeve's red boots. And while he was serviceable in the role, he wasn't ever going to hold a candle to what people saw as the definitive Superman. How could he be? What Superman Returns lacks in action, it makes up for tenfold in heart. We're shown less about what it's like to be the icon Superman, and we're now instead shown what it feels like to have the burden of being Superman. I know people have mixed feelings about this movie, but I don't think that there's any questioning that it was a much more fitting follow-up than the other Superman fails. I mean flicks. I think Kevin Spacey is brilliant as Lex Luthor. No, I mean seriously, I have no idea how the man is so authentic in portraying a supremely evil, opportunistic, irredeemable rich dude who abused the power that he was given. I don't know how he does it, but man, he is believable here. Oh, what's that? Oh, I see. He's a method actor. In all seriousness, Kevin Spacey is actually one of my all-time favorite Lex Luthors. But it's still hard to see this portrayal of the character as an evolution to Gene Hackman's time in the role. It just doesn't sync up properly. Same goes for the Lois Lane in this movie, as she does nothing to try to duplicate Margot Kidder's performance. It feels like a completely alternate take on the character. They don't act the same, they don't react the same, they are not the same. It feels like an entirely different interpretation. And like the movie itself, it feels like its own thing. In my opinion, had this movie not shackled itself to a series from the 1970s and tried to go its own route, go full reboot, I think it probably would be looked back upon much more fondly. While there are a lot of elements in this movie that are clearly emulating those past Superman movies, it feels much more like a tribute than a proper follow-up. I really wish they didn't lean so far into the lore on this one, and just let this movie survive as its own. However, considering that the movie was a continuation of the Superman franchise, it brings us to a continuation of that continuation. In the CW vs. Big Crisis on Infinite Earths event, we watched the CW DC superheroes and villains travel throughout the multiverse. One of such heroes that the gang meets is Brandon Routh's Superman, and by that extension, Christopher Reeve Superman. And I said before that I thought Brandon Routh was a bit too green in playing Superman during Superman Returns. Not the case here. The guy does everything right. And I think more than his time in a feature-length film that he was the titular character for, the 20 minutes of screen time he gets here by far blows that away. To me, this just feels much more Superman. What's even stranger is that this version of the character makes references both to the events of Superman Returns, by mentioning his past son Jason, but also makes references to Superman 3 when talking about fighting himself in the past, which is confusing because Superman Returns actually retcons Superman 3, but I'm just going to take canon out of this and I'm just going to enjoy the reference for reference sake, as was probably intended. And now we're getting a full-fledged comic book series to replace both continuities. There's also several other times that the cast reprised their roles, whether it be Margot Kidder on Saturday Night Live, playing Lois Lane during a superhero party, or these movies Clark and Lois reuniting in cartoon form for an AT&T commercial, of all things. It's only 30 seconds long, so there's not a whole lot to talk about, but I just wanted to state that it happened. Do what you will with that information. Christopher Reeve may unfortunately be long gone, but his memory still lives on today, and it's looking like his impact has a lot of life left in it. I completely understand why he is Superman for so many people. And while I personally have always been fond of him in the role, researching this video and having to sit through all of these films has really solidified it for me. Christopher Reeve is my Superman. Along with Brandon Routh and Tom Welling. Sorry, to me they're all tied for number one. That ain't changing. Love them all equally. With that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and that was the many, many, many adventures of Superman 78.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bad time. Same bad channel.
Look, Up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman. Yes, it's Superman.
Shut up. Get out.